All right, we are continuing about slope, but if you notice, this time it gives us a table. So making sure you know the difference between a table like this, where it has the X and Y at the top, and it's got rows and columns, versus a graph where it actually has it on a line, right? So this is a graph, and then this is a table. So make sure you know the difference between graphs and tables as we move forward, because they'll start referring to those, and you need to know which one it might be talking about. So when it gives us graphs on it or slopes on a graph, it's easy because we can just kind of look at the direction of the line. It's not as easy when we're talking about on a table. It's not hard, but there's an equation that we're going to need to know. So there is a slope formula that we're going to use, and it is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so if you notice the numbers are kind of down on the bottom right of the letters, and we've got to be able to identify what to even do here, right? So it looks a little bit crazy. I would really, really, really recommend writing this down. And this is one that you're going to end up having to memorize. M is slope, right? We talked about y equals mx plus b before, and m is always your slope. X and y are the points on the line, right? And then the b is your beginning point, your y-intercept. We're going to get back to using this, but that's really why we're focusing on this point right here, because now we're going to know what number goes in here using specific points, the x and the y. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to pick any point on the table. I'm usually going to stick with positive numbers. So this is going to be my x1, y1, because it's the first point we're looking at. And then this is going to be the second point we look at. So this is going to be x2 and y2. Okay, and I just chose those because they're easy. They're positive numbers. I don't really want to deal with negative ones if I don't have to. Then what we're going to do is we're going to substitute those into this equation. Okay, so y2, the second y I chose, is 0, minus y1 is 1. And then x2 is the second x I chose, which is 2, minus, because that's what it says, x1, which was 0. And then all we have to do is subtract. 0 minus 1 is negative 1, and 2 minus 0 is 2. So our slope is negative 1/2, which means it's a negative slope, meaning on my graph, it's going to go downward. And what that really means, if we want to get technical, is it means that we're going to go down 1. So let's say we start here. We're going to go down 1 over 2. Down 1 over 2. That's how we're going to start seeing our slope, but we'll get there. Okay. Right now, we're going to use the slope formula. So that's why I would recommend writing it down, substitute it in the correct way, and then it tells us it's a negative slope. And then again, I showed you the relation directly to the graphs because that's what we're going to be getting to next. Okay, so m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And again, that's an equation you're going to be using through geometry and algebra 2 and all the things. Okay, let's see, why is it not resetting? Okay, this one here, it says choose the relation with a positive rate of change. So again, remember rate of change is the same thing as slope, right? So y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, and we're going to find the differences here, okay? So what we could do on your tables, no, let's just stick with it. x1, y1, because it'll help us in the long run. x2, y2, okay? And then again, remember your slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So we're just going to apply it to each of these tables. So y2 is negative 1 minus y1 is negative 1. And I put this in parentheses because I don't want the negatives next to each other. Over x2 is 1 minus x1 is 0. So here I know 1 minus 0 is 1. And negative 1 minus negative 1 is negative 2. I think. Let me put it in the calculator. I don't want to be wrong. -1 plus 1, technically, which would be 0, I believe. But my brain's not working, so we're going to make sure we're right. -1 minus -1, yeah, is 0. Okay, so 0 divided by 1. Now here's the thing. Can I take 0 and put it into one group? No. And if that confuses you, put that in the calculator. 0 divided by 1 gets you 0. Okay. All right. Then we have here, this one here is y2 minus y1. So it's going to be x1, y1, x2, y2. And we're going to have -3 minus -2 over 2 minus 0. Well, 2 minus 0 is 2. And then again, I'm going to put these in my calculator correctly. -3 minus -2 is -1. So my slope there is -1/2. We want a positive rate of change, so this is negative, so that's not it. Then we do the same thing on the next one. We have x1, y1, x2, y2, and we're going to set it in this formula. y2 minus y1, -2 minus -3 over 2 minus 0. So that gets me 2 down here again. And then this time I'm going to do -2 minus -3, which gets me 1. So that case, it's a positive 1/2. So that's my answer. Okay. So just showing that each piece relates directly to the next. Let's look at the next one. What type of slope is the relation have? So same thing. We're going to be using m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And that's x1, y1, x2, y2. And we're going to plug it in. So y2 minus y1, so 7 minus -1 over 3 minus 3. Okay, so 7 minus 1, -1 is 8, and 3 minus 3 is 0. Okay, so here's the thing. Can I take 8 things and put them into 0 groups? Okay, if I have 8 things, I'm at least going to have one of something, one group of something, right? So if you put it in your calculator and put 8 divided by 0, depending on your calculator, it might say error, or it might actually tell you undefined. Okay, so undefined is going to be here. So let's talk about that for a second. So if we're talking undefined, it's going to be a number divided by 0. And if it's 0, it's going to be 0 divided by a number. Okay, and the way I always think about it is groups. This is your number of groups down here at the bottom. I can never put a group of something into 0 groups, because if I have them, they're there. So that's why it's impossible. It's undefined. Okay, let's look at the next one. I think that's what we just did. Okay, positive rate of change. So same thing here, x1, y1, x2, y2, and set it in the right way. So y2 is -1 minus y1 is 3 over x1 is 1 minus x2 is 1 minus x1 is 0. So 1 minus 0 is 1. And then put that in my calculator. -1 minus 3 is -4. And then -4 divided by 1, if you put that in your calculator, gets you -4. So that's a negative rate of change. We're looking for positive. Okay. This one here, x1, y1, x2, y2. If you notice, these are the same numbers, so that's going to come out a little special. It's either going to be undefined or 0, right? So let's see. we have y2 is 1, minus y1 is 1, x2 is 1, minus 0, 1 minus 1 is 0, and 1. So again, the number's on the bottom, so that means my slope is going to be 0. Okay, and again, you can put it in the calculator and it'll show you that it's 0. We want a positive rate of change. So anytime you see the numbers repeat here, it's going to be 0. Okay, this one here, x2, y2, or sorry, x1, y1, and then the second point is here, and then we're going to plug it in. Y2 is 6, minus y1 is negative 2, x is 3. So again, here my x's are repeating, right? So that means I'm going to have a 0 at the bottom, which tells me right away it should be undefined, unless this was a 0 as well, but it's not. It's an 8. So this is going to be undefined, which leads us to assume it's got to be this one, right? So when I'm looking for positive to make this a lot less work, when my y's repeat, it's going to be 0. When my x's repeat, it's going to be undefined. Now I can prove if it's this one or this one, right? So again, x1, y1, x2, y2, y2 minus y1 is 4 minus 0, and 1 minus 0 equals 4 over 1, which equals 4, which is positive, so that has to be my answer. Okay, so knowing those shortcuts, when the y's repeat, it's going to be 0, and when the x's repeat, it's going to be undefined, which is what we did on the slope guy, right? We had his negative, positive, we had the undefined, it was x equals a number, right? That's what we're saying here. And then zeros were y for the tongue equals a number. So when the y's repeat, it's 0, and when the x's repeat, it's undefined. Okay, so if that helps to memorize, if not, it was never anything I could really memorize, but there's some people that can. So it's up to you. But let's look at another one. So this one, I don't have the x's repeating, I don't have the y's repeating, so I'm going to automatically cancel out these two. Just saves me some time. And then x1, y1, x2, y2. Make sure we use the formula y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So y2 is negative 5 minus negative 2 over 2 minus 0. And then plug it in the calculator. Negative 5 minus negative 2 equals negative 3. And 2 minus 0 is 2, so it's a negative 3 halves. It's a negative slope. Okay, and then let's just do one more of these. So we want a negative rate of change. So again, my x's are repeating here, or sorry, my y's were repeating, my x's are repeating, so it's one of these two. Just saves us a little bit of time. So this is x1, y1, x2, y2, negative 2 minus 0 over 2 minus 0. So that'd be negative 2 over 2, which is negative 1, and it's a negative slope. So that's got to be my answer. Okay. So hopefully that helps. If you need more instruction, you can watch this video one more time, or you can schedule a time to meet up. This one here, it has x's repeating. So I'm going to take out negative, I'm going to take out positive. It's one of these two things, right? So if you think about the slope guy, if that helps you, we said his nose ring was an x equaled the number. And then this was 0 and the y equaled the number, right? So let's see if that matches up. I can't remember if it's opposites or if it's the same thing. Let's see, x1, y1, x2, y2. So it's negative 6 minus 7 over negative 2 minus negative 2. Okay. So -2 minus -2 equals 0. And 6 minus 7, or sorry, -6 minus 7 is -13. And I can't put that into any groups, right? So if I do that in my calculator, divide it by 0, it's either going to say error or undefined, which means it is right there what we had on our slope guy, right? So if your x's repeat, it's undefined. It's his nose ring. Okay, so if that helps you remember, use it. Okay, so if you need more help, rewatch the video or schedule a time to meet. Other than that, 10 points, get more math.